And she just said, how could you not trust that I was your friend? And I just sat there like, "Oh, why didn't I trust that? I was so afraid that you wouldn't be my friend if
Mm.
you knew the real me, basically." Um, and that made me think twice about, trusting people and giving more people the benefit of the doubt.
This is the Q Suite. I'm Ken Kundis.
And I'm James Gunselman. Welcome to your seat at the table. We're excited to welcome Nancy Del Pizzo, partner at Rivkin Radler.
Rivkin Radler is one of the most important IP and copyright firms in the New Jersey area. And Nancy has some really interesting perspectives about IP, about how it applies to AI and technology. But I think that what really struck me from this conversation, James, was really her understanding of the environment of a law firm and what that means to someone who is out at a law firm or thinking about coming out at a law firm, and really had this idea about leading with performance first before really kind of coming out entirely. And I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, what stuck with me when we had our discussion with her was that story, her first workplace story of introducing her girlfriend at the time,
Yeah.
later wife.
Yeah.
And I don't want to tell too much to our listeners, but stay tuned. That was a really good story.
Yeah, because it really shows her trajectory and how her thinking kind of evolved over time. So I think that part is going to be resonant for many of you. So without further ado, this is Nancy Del Pizzo in the Q Suite. Nancy Del Pizzo, welcome to the Q Suite.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
It's really great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. To start out, could you just give us a little bit about yourself and your career and what kind of the trajectory that you've been on?
Sure. My name is Nancy Del Pizzo, as you just said, and I'm a partner at a fairly mid-sized law firm called Rivkin Radler LLP. I'm the co-chair of the intellectual property group, and I previously had a career as a writer and an editor and a consultant.
Cool. So one of the things that I know we had talked about is, you just said it, sort of what your role is as the co-chair of intellectual property. And I think a lot of times for out executives or out lawyers in particular, there is a belief that they are going to lean toward family law or toward things that are much more kind of coded to LGBTQ. You haven't done that. Talk to me about why and sort of what that trajectory has looked like for you.
Yeah, so look, we're a part of the community, right? So we're more aware, or we have a heightened awareness of different laws that affect us. And a lot of us go into that part of law just because it's familiar and we want to be involved and we want to help the community. But some of us have other interests too. And for me, I was previously a writer, and intellectual property was a longtime interest of mine. I didn't know anything about copyright law when I was writing, and my works were infringed. So it naturally led me to go into IP law. And, frankly, I think it's important that we in the community aren't just pigeonholed into one area. I think it's a great thing to see other folks who are doing other things so that we can all feel that we can go after whatever we think we want to go after in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's one of the founding principles, I think, of the Q Suite to a certain degree, too, is that we regard ourselves as a business podcast for gay people, not a gay podcast for business people. And so that, I think, aligns really well with what you're saying. However, on the other hand, you are very out in the community. You have done a number of speeches. You're out and visible in our community. So when you make that pivot, does that feel like a duality? Does that feel like two different people, or is it two sides of the same coin for you?
So I don't see it as two different people. I mean, for me, that's not what I did right from the beginning. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But what we are in our personal lives is important, right? And so that part of me where I'm out participating in this podcast, for instance, or doing the keynote for an LGBTQ plus event, or being part of the New Jersey State Bar Association's LGBT rights section. Those are important to me individually and as a person, and I don't think they take anything away from, my practice area. In fact, I think that just makes me better at it. And it also connects me to the community and gives me a really good referral source, because I do get calls from people who say, hey, people in our community who say, hey, who do you know who can do this, who can do that? And, by being involved, I have hundreds of them at my fingertips. That's an exaggeration, but a lot at my fingertips.
You mentioned that it makes you better, that you think it makes you better. Can you double click on that for us? In what way does it make you better, do you think?
So, well, as a person, right? Because I feel like it's a way of giving back, to be
Yeah.
present. And also, I'm showing others who are younger that you can be who you are. You can be your authentic self and still have a successful career. And it didn't always
Yeah.
feel that way. And, I'll just give you an example. I did the keynote for William Patterson University last year, and I was stunned when a young student came up to me and said, can you tell me, like, how did you come out to your parents? I just thought, what?
Yeah.
You're not out to your parents? Like, why? Why do you not feel comfortable to be out to your parents? And that was just a stunner. That's still the way it is in the Northeast, in New Jersey, of all places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you do hear that less and less. I know
like I said,
being
I was
around
stunned. I was
James.
shocked,
Yeah.
but yeah, you do hear it less and less.
Yeah. I mean, being around James tells a story about his coming out as being pretty frictionless. And that is something that just blows my mind. So when I
Yeah.
hear something like that, that makes me a little bit sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at least
What did you say?
she was at the event and she came up to me and, I said to her, you have to do it when you can, but coming to these groups, coming to these meetings, being a participant helps you develop, a group of community who can, support you as you go through this. So you don't feel left out. And, I did say, ask the question, why do you feel like you can't? And she didn't have an answer. Really, she didn't know if she couldn't.
Yeah.
But she was scared.
Yeah.
So, you know, all of us
And
aren't as lucky as James.
Yeah.
yeah, I also think that, going to events and being part of these forums, it releases the pressure valve a little bit. You don't feel that's this kind of incumbent panic that you can feel when you feel completely alone in a situation.
Right.
So
Right.
that's another kind of benefit to just being out in the community. I mean, we've done it in bars, we've done it in groups, we've done it in bowling alleys. Like I remember softball and bowling. Those were all places that kind of gave me a sense of peace about being gay.
It's interesting that you say that, because even when you're not completely out, you can do that. And so,
Yeah.
back in undergrad, back in the 80s, when I was at the University of Florida, I wasn't completely out. And I remember going to a National Organization for Women meeting, and this guy got up, Bruce McCoy, stood up, and I don't know how I remember his name, but he stood up and he said, we're starting a new group for people who are gay. If anybody wants to come, let me know. And I remember walking up to him and whispering, is that for women too? Absolutely come. And I remember going to the meeting, and it was in the student center, and there was a doorway there. And I sat there like this. So here I am. I'm at this meeting, but I'm covering my face from the doorway, because I was, out but in, so,
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. That's not that easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one, thank you for sharing that story. I do think hearing those stories about the power of visibility, having you be in front of the students at William Patterson University and being able to just connect with a student who's struggling with coming out. I think it's just so important, just creating those opportunities for students to be able to feel like they can ask, mundane questions to us these days, but it was so important to her, right? And I want to hone in on that feeling, right? I know during our initial conversations, with you being on the Q Suite, that before you entered law and focusing on your experience being a writer, you authored an article that was advocating for not coming out at work.
Yeah.
Walk us through what was going on in your head when you wrote that piece, and looking back, like, what do you view that perspective as a necessary survival mechanism, like, being in corporate or at work, or was it a mindset that you actively had to unlearn?
Yeah, so I think it was a mindset that I had to actively unlearn, but certain things happened in my life to allow me to do it. I mean, I was in publishing in New York City. Of all places, you would think you could be whoever you are, right? But I didn't feel that way. And I think it was because, there were jokes, there were the words that people used when they wanted to make fun of folks in our community. And it used to be like just, freely come out. I'm using come out, but they would just freely say it. And I thought, okay, I'm a woman, short woman. I've got those two things against me.
You're not that short, Nancy.
In the business world. Do I really want them to know something about me that they can't see, really, right? Or I thought they couldn't see, right? Because I didn't fit into the stereotype. So I wrote this piece, and I had a friend who happened to be a friend of Michelangelo Signorelli, who was one of the co-founders of Out Week magazine, of all magazines. And he got me a meeting with him, and I pitched this article about staying in the closet at work to Out Week magazine. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, but he wasn't offensive about rejecting it, but he was like, yeah, no, that won't work for our publication. And when I think about it today, I can't believe I even thought that would fly, with that publication. I mean, here he was outing people. Yeah, but
That was the mission. That was on the masthead of that publication, was outed
Exactly.
that everyone must be out. Yeah.
Exactly. And that friend who got me that meeting just recently, he posted something on Facebook that they're doing something with Outweek. They're trying to do a historical perspective about Outweek. And I said, do you remember the meeting you got me? I mean,
Let me ask you this. Do you have grace for that person that you were then? When you
Yeah,
look back at that
absolutely.
person?
Absolutely, I do, because there was a need for me to do that. I mean, I'm not sure if I told you this, Ken, but I took it further. I mean, in publishing, I literally created a different persona from the person who is now my wife, the same person who was with me back then in the 80s. I mean, we've been together for like 30 something years. And, when you go to work, especially in publishing, there's a lot of chitter chatter, right? About articles, about what you're doing, but it's also, what are you doing later? Who are you going out with? I want to invite you to my wedding. And I created a persona that Carol was Carl. And so I talked about Carl, and I made excuses for not being able to bring Carl to a wedding or an event. And there was a time after I was working, I think when I became a freelance writer, I was on a train going into Manhattan, and one of the editors I had worked with early on in my career was on that train, and I sat next to her, and she was one of the people who had invited me to her wedding. And I said, Carl can't make it. He's visiting his grandmother in Florida. I told her the truth on that train ride, and she was visibly upset with me. And she just said, how could you not trust that I was your friend? And I just sat there like, why didn't I trust that? I was so afraid that you wouldn't be my friend if you knew the real me, basically. And that made me think twice about, trusting people and giving more people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How did Carl
and
feel about that?
congratulations on your years together with Carol. That is
Thank you.
amazing. That is amazing to hear. Recently married myself, so I'm like year one in, So
That's funny,
congratulations.
Ken's like, how did Carol feel about that?
How did Carl feel about that? Yeah.
She was just as far in the closet as I was. I would
Well,
say.
that helps.
So it didn't bother her.
In a twisted way, that kind of helps.
Right, because she wasn't, we probably would have been, arguing about it, or maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And to flip the script, right? Fast forward to you today, Nancy. You are out, you are doing keynotes, you've really inverted your perspective on it. So, and now you're a guest speaker on the Q Suite, right? Of all podcasts, right? What was Was there, or what was there, a specific cultural or personal inflection point in your life that made you realize staying in the closet at work was no longer viable or desirable for you?
Yes, and I think it was partially due to being older and changing my career. I'll have to say when I went to law school, so I did that later in life, right? I was still partially in the closet in law school. I was still concerned. I wanted a job. I didn't want anyone to look at me differently because I'm gay. And also, by the way, if you're older and you go to law school, there's like a bunch of age issues that happens, which I didn't realize until, my law school had me put the year of my undergrad on my resume. And I found that I didn't start getting interviews until I took that off. So there was
Interesting.
already the age thing. I also found that there was still an issue with women in law when I went to law school, which surprised me. So I didn't want that third bullet or yeah, I
Black
didn't want
mark or whatever. Yeah,
the
red
third
flag.
black
Yeah.
mark, the third red flag. So I kept that in the closet until, I had my first job and they were starting a diversity committee. And I thought, you know what? I'm kind of sick of this. I'm tired of, as a lawyer, you work long hours. It's much longer than when I was a writer. So I'm at work a long time and I'm with these people and I don't want to have this fake persona anymore.
It's
I,
exhausting, right?
it's
Mhm.
exhausting. It kind of blocks your ability to grow in your profession. I mean, because
Yeah.
you're stuck. You have this thing here you got to be careful about. And I wanted Carol to be able to take advantage of all the great things that happens when you become a lawyer. Like, I view them as great, like the firm's outing, which they called it an outing, getting to go to a private golf course where,
Mhm.
my first job, they invited spouses and significant others. And if I wasn't out, she wasn't going. Right.
Yeah.
So I
Why
decided,
shouldn't you be available to that? I mean, that's part of our having our seat at the table. We deserve those things in the same way that sort of our straight counterparts do.
exactly. And so, my peers who were younger than me, they already knew and they didn't give a crap at all. Right. So it was, and I had the job. So I thought, you know what? If this makes me lose the job, then fine, I'll get another one. So I had Carol come to the first firm outing.
Did you prep
Yeah.
people before you brought her? Did you tell people?
Uh,
Or did you just spring Carol on, say, hey, what's Carl? Now it's Carol, and like do some reveal or something?
no, I actually thought, we'll just sit with the other associates and it'll be fine. Maybe no one will care. Maybe no one will ask. But what happened at that first outing is, I go to things early. I'm always early. I'm usually not one of the late people. I'm one of the early people. So we
Guilty.
were early and we were there before most, if not all of my associate friends. And I walked in with Carol and one of the partners came up to me, bless her heart, and realized Nancy came with a woman. And she came up to us and she said, hi. And she said, come and sit with us. And it was a table of other partners. And that was uncomfortable because there were two seats, but they were on opposite sides of the table. And I'll just never forget this one senior partner said, well, I'm not moving. I'm sitting next to my wife. It was so uncomfortable that I just thought, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. But we ended up not sitting at that table, sitting somewhere else with the partner that had brought me over there. And she just chatted with us a while. And then when the associates came, we just sat with them. And what ended up happening was like a week later, that partner who had been, kind to us came into my office and she said, we're starting a diversity committee. Do you want to be on it? And I thought, yeah, okay, that's great. So yeah, I thought, okay, this worked out. I'm okay.
I love how that story ended. I wasn't sure how it was going to end, but I love the way it ended. It does beg a question for me that I'm always curious about. One of the things that James and I think both, I don't mean to speak for him, but love doing about this is to hear about the experience of out people in different industries. I've spent the
Mm-hmm.
majority of my career in financial services and technology, really a combination of those two things. James really comes from a background in pharma. And I think of law as being something very distinctly different from a cultural perspective about that. I think of it as kind of partitioning. When I think of it, and look, the fact of the matter is a lot of my viewpoint about what a law firm would look like comes from TV. I'm not going to deny that. But it
Same.
does seem the kind of, it does seem a bit impenetrable in that way. I kind of imagine it to be very competitive. Talk to me about the specific nuances about being an out person, particularly given your perspective of having a previous career, what the differences are, what does it feel like on a day-to-day basis to be an out person in a law firm?
So today, where I am today, it feels no different than I'm sure anyone who's not out and who doesn't have a sexual orientation, that's the same as mine. I am currently at a firm that is open to anyone. So it's actually kind of wonderful. And we have a lot of out people here. I say a lot. We have many more than I've ever experienced at another law firm. But I will say that law firms have cultures. They just do. And even though in that first scenario, that turned out to be okay with that one partner, there still was a culture there that didn't work for me. And I felt like I was trying to fit, a square peg into a round hole there. And so I left. I left for a smaller firm. I took a pay cut just because I just couldn't take it anymore. I needed to not just feel like I could be who I am, but to be accepted as who I am by more people, not to feel like, ooh, I didn't like that look, or, even though no one was overtly doing anything.
But if you're not being fully embraced.
Exactly. I could feel it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I went to this smaller firm, and let me just tell you the difference at the holiday party, because I just told you what that holiday party was like. This holiday party, Carol came. It was also bring your spouse or significant other, and the managing partner of that firm came up to her, shook her hand, and was chatting with her for like a half an hour at the bar. And she noticed the difference and said to me, "What a difference, right?" And when we got married, when we were allowed to get married, they gave us a gift. They tried to help me find a judge to marry us. I mean, they were just so open. I mean, there's a difference. That's a difference. That's in being embraced
That's being
versus
embraced, yeah,
versus
versus being
tolerated.
tolerated. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So
Absolutely. And to hone in on like the psychological safety of it all, I do think that a holiday party or a holiday outing is a good benchmark,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Regardless of industry, on what psychological safety looks like for an LGBTQ plus person, in the office. So talking about that experience from a psychologically safe perspective, moving from like a bigger firm to a smaller medium firm, like did the dynamics of your identity, personal acceptance, day to day, just feeling safe being your authentic self at work, move, like how did it move from those different sizes within your industry?
so I went from being a little bit shady about what was going on in my life to top management, right? I didn't have to do that with associates, to feeling free to chat with the senior partners about anything, about what I was doing for the weekend, who I was doing it with. And they would ask me, and they were genuinely interested, you know? Um, and I'll have to say, I'm not at that firm now, but that's because one of the partners there was leaving, and they came into my office. The other partners came into my office and said, "Hey, he's going to ask you to go with him to another firm. Before he does, come and talk to us." And what ended up happening is I left. It turned out to be a great thing because the smaller firm ended up imploding, and I didn't know that was going to happen, but this particular partner did. But before I left, because I didn't want to leave and I had no knowledge of what was happening at that particular business, when I interviewed here, I interviewed them. And I would never tell someone to actually do this. I mean, you don't go around and ask, like, what do you think of gay people? which is
Yeah.
what I was doing. I was asking the managing partner, like, do you have any gay attorneys? How do you feel about that? And his response was, I never thought about it. It's not something that I really, care about. Like, who cares? To me,
How
that
good
was
of
a
a
great
lawyer are you?
response.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That was a great response. And I got that throughout all the different offices that I visited. And they laugh about it today. They said, yeah, Nancy's the interviewee who came in and interviewed us.
It,
It's a world of difference. Having that kind of support, having another diversity committee, having, rainbow ribbons circulated during Pride. It's just such a different way to work. I mean, it's so much
absolutely.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
energy that
And
brings into your life.
Yeah.
totally. And just to share, Nancy, I don't think you're alone in interviewing who you're being interviewed by to make sure you feel safe, right? Like, I feel like that's actually a trend that we're seeing now is more
Yeah.
people when they're interviewing, they want to make sure they feel safe to be the authentic self, regardless on what community they sit in. So I don't, your story, I actually relate to wholly because I didn't, I didn't have the ability to go around and be like, are there gay people here? I did not have the ability to do that, but I did, there's a way to get it out when you're in the interview process as well. If you do think safety is, something that may be not top priority at the company you're interviewing with.
Right. Right. And it's not just safety. It is safety, right? You want to be safe to be who you are, but it's just if you're going to be somewhere for hours and you're going to be socializing with these people, you want to be able to just not worry about being who you are. Because you have so much other stuff to worry about, right?
Exactly.
You know?
Like you'd think that the employer would want that as well because they want all of you. They want all of your brain as well. And if you're
Yeah.
putting a part of your brain applying to the process of staying in the closet or just sort of not feeling comfortable, that impacts your performance. Of course, it does.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's better to have folks who are different across the board because it just promotes creativity, inclusivity.
Yeah,
It makes you a better legal team, I think.
no question.
Ultimately.
I would be remiss if I didn't, while I have you, talk a little bit about AI and about some copyright stuff because in my day job now currently I'm working on pivoting a historically fairly traditional staffing and IT company into a full AI company, and so that has a lot of challenges and a lot of interesting nuances about copyright and sort of the state of copyright law in
Hmm.
the AI world. And one of the things that I know that you guys have been working on is around copywriting prompts. Talk to me a little bit about sort of what that whole area feels like at this moment. Obviously, it's evolving, and I'm imagining you're rushing to keep up with everything, as I think all of us are. But talk to me from a legal perspective about the copyright aspects of AI that are attached to the work you're doing.
Yeah, and it's not just copyright. So sophisticated prompts are potentially patentable too, which not everybody thinks about. But yeah, I mean, so the law has not caught up with the technology yet, right? There's split decisions throughout the country, and everyone in IP is watching them carefully. But as we're watching them, I'm getting more calls from businesses who are completely created with it by AI,
Yeah.
or businesses or folks who want to create their businesses with AI, or my job is to keep as atop of what's going on as I can and talk to these clients about risk, what the risks are, depending on, of course, the facts of how they're using AI, and, try to counsel them on how to reduce those risks. And ultimately, then it's a business decision, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're moving forward in this new world of technology when the law is not crept up to support you yet. But it's exciting too, because it's why I love being an IP lawyer, because even without AI, it's about technology and it's always about new inventions and constant change. So my professional life is different every day. which
Yeah.
I love. That's what I love about it.
Absolutely.
Nancy, I know we kind of talked about this earlier with, your visibility in keynote and leadership in the board association in New Jersey, whatnot. Tying it back from your legal expertise and marrying it with your highly visible leadership. You regularly sit on panels that discuss the silent invisible minority in the legal profession. And, as someone who's very interested in learning more about the legal industry as a whole, sitting from pharma, it'd be really cool to hear more about it, is in a technical demanding field like IP and data privacy, how are firms evolving their cultures to ensure that we aren't just hiring diverse talent, but we're actually retaining them in a long-term sustainable manner?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, but there's, two aspects to that. The first one is getting them in, and the second one is retaining them, right? So you have to do both. And I think getting the diverse folks in means, your HR person or team reaches out to affinity groups, various different organizations, and then you get like a plethora of resumes to consider, not just, one type of person. And that's great. And so then they come in and you have to show them that inclusivity matters. And I think, one of the ways to do that is to have people like me who are willing to talk about it at the firm, is to have keep a DEI presence in your firm, whether it's through a committee, whether it's through education. We do that here. We have speakers. We have our clients come in and talk about DEI. We're still doing that, even though it's been tough for some law firms in recent years because of the political climate. But it's not about just hiring a person because of who they are. It's about having a broad array of diverse people to choose from and then choosing the best people out of that array. And then once they're in your hands, you're here, you want to keep them there, right? So you got to do things to make them feel inclusive.
Yeah.
And that's the culture part, I think.
And you can't fake that. I mean, clearly where you work is somewhere that is genuinely accepting. And you can't fake that. I've worked for organizations that had a lot of really great window dressing, but when push came to shove, there was two different standards.
Oh, absolutely. And, I hear from friends at certain firms that I know. Well, look, culture in law firms, it can be political because some law firms are politically connected. And obviously, if the firm's culture leans right, you probably won't feel as comfortable there, right? And I know folks who work at firms that do lean one way politically, and they might pass around a button during Pride Week, but it's not the same,
No.
Yeah.
It's just not the same.
No.
And you'll know it because you'll feel it.
Yeah.
You will feel it. That's the one thing about which there's no question. You'll definitely feel it. So we're getting close to the end of our time together. I think we probably could spend the rest of the afternoon talking, but I'm sure you have important things to do. So we have a little bit of a quick fire round. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, just one or two sentences for each of these. No wrong answers, of course, but just the quick fire round. So if you weren't a lawyer or a writer, what completely unrelated career would you try to have? Can't say professional tennis player.
Yeah, no, that was my dream way back when. I might say comedian. And I say that because my 1970-something journal said I want to be a writer, a lawyer, and a comedian, which I find hysterical. I was a writer, and I am a lawyer.
You are
so
a lawyer.
I only need one more, just comedian.
You got plenty of time.
I have time, but that's a special talent. So
it is, yeah.
I have to really work on that.
Okay. Next question. You, as we mentioned, are a former athlete at William Patterson. Who is your all-time favorite professional tennis player to watch? And I'm going to probably give you mine too. If you don't agree with me, I'm going to probably want to fight you after this, but go ahead.
So that's changed for me depending on who is playing. I mean, look, I loved watching Billie Jean King and Martina Navratilova because they were serve and volleyers. I played boys tennis in high school. So I developed a serve and volley game, even though I am short, unfortunately. But so I loved watching them. And, most women do not play that kind of game and still don't play that kind of game. And frankly, a lot of men today don't even play that kind of game because, the rackets have changed the sport and it's all about power now. It's like serve and game. Serve and, I win the point. I don't have to do anything else. But I will say that I found the Wimbledon final this year, the men's and the women's, was really exciting because I saw more strategy. Yeah. Even though, and they were tight matches.
They were. Yeah, we're in a golden age. Well, I mean, look, Federer all day long. I mean, how can you not watch him play tennis and think that that's the way it's supposed to look, more than anything else? And then he steps off the court and he's James Bond. I mean, if you don't aspire to be Roger Federer, there's something deeply wrong with you, as far as I'm concerned. So, final question. Final quick fire question. James will have one final question for you. What is one book or podcast you think every aspiring leader should check out? You can't say the Q Suite.
I was just about to say the Q Suite, of course, the Q Suite. What are you talking about? I tend to listen to podcasts that are, top of mind to what's going on in the world. And obviously I'm interested in tech. So I love Pivot. I don't know if you've seen that. It's Kara Swisher. It's just
I love it.
Unfiltered, smart.
Topical, timely. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. I'm a fan as well.
It's tech, it's finance, it's politics.
But it's not stuffy.
All about, it's no way stuffy, and I love their banter. I love the way they talk with each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, James, take it away.
Awesome. So to close us out, Nancy, we ask all of our guests the Q Suite mentoring moment question. So imagine an ambitious young LGBTQ plus associate entering their first major law firm today. They're brilliant, but yet they hesitate to bring their full self to work, right? And that fear is because they want to be viewed as a serious litigator, right?
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give this associate in our Q Suite mentoring moment?
So again, it's going to depend on where they've landed, right? And they're going to know what the culture is pretty quickly. If it's a culture, and maybe you're going to want to slap me for saying this, but if it's a culture that does not seem to be inclusive, I would start out that career really digging into proving my performance. And then, hey, and this is who I am. Because once you do that, you've kind of embossed into someone's mind what they think of you as a professional, as a new professional. And then you don't have to worry about, I think you have to worry less about what they're going to think of you as a person. And keep in mind, you don't have to stay where you start. Yeah. And you probably ought to know within the first 3 to 5 years whether that firm is right for you. I think I waited too long to leave my first firm. I waited to, I think, year 5, 6. Don't be afraid to do it sooner. Because once you find that combination of, people who respect you professionally and love you as a person, your life is so much better. And you will become a better professional. So, that's what I would say.
Yeah, really sound advice, Nancy.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Well, with that, Nancy, thank you so much for joining us in the Q Suite. And we hope everyone enjoys the episode. Please like, share, and follow us on various podcast platforms. And until next time, thanks everyone from the Q Suite.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Nancy.